Hey everybody, it is me, Corrie Sommers. Today I have a special guest, Nick, and Nick is with Grid Alternative, and we're going to be talking about solar. Now, if you own a home, this is something that you might want to think about, and there's a lot that's changed, so stay tuned. So hey everybody, Nick is with Grid Alternative, which is a nonprofit that deals with solar. So I want you to explain to people kind of like what your company does and how it helps people, and like let's do like the 5-minute elevator pitch about solar itself.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity, Corrie. Thank you. So Grid Alternatives, we're a nonprofit. We've been in business since 2004. And our mission is to make renewable energy technology accessible along with workforce development to underserved communities. So in a practical sense, what we do is we install solar electric systems in primarily disadvantaged communities, pollution-burdened communities, and we also provide like hands-on job training. So we have this barn raising type model where we install solar with job trainees and volunteers that want to learn about the solar panel or the solar technology industry, and our certified solar staff will take out a crew and install solar for a family. And by the way, the systems are at no cost. The reason why they're at no cost is because in the state of California, there are these laws that have been passed that provide incentives, and it's coming from two main funding sources, anchor funding, if you will. It's the California Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program. So there's something called the Cap and Trade Program. It's basically a cap on greenhouse gas emissions for large polluters. And a percentage of that money, according to the law, has to be reinvested back in communities that are pollution burdened. So that's one of the sources of the income, and the other source of funding is coming from utility ratepayers. So basically, when consumers pay their electricity bill, there's a percentage of that money that goes into projects like this.
I don't want to interrupt, but some of the things that you're talking about, I'm kind of like, So when you talk about underserved communities here in Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles, which areas are we referring to at this point?
Yes, so that's a great question. So basically, it's determined the state of California back in 2006 passed what's called the Global Warming Solutions Act. And it identified that we have a pollution problem. I'm pretty sure for those that were living in LA, right, a couple of years ago, there's a bunch of smog and like
so much better.
Right. So if you're driving on the 10 freeway and you try to look downtown, you see this thick layer of fog, right? So we recognize that there's a problem, and also there's this kind of like intersection between like major freeways or highway corridors that produce a lot of pollution because of transportation and trucking. So pollution doesn't necessarily discriminate problem, and there's this intersection between major freeways and communities, and basically that it creates an environment, a situation that burdens a community with pollution. So what the bill does or what the law does is identifies that these communities are there, and that we recognize that we have to try to reduce the impact and pollution in those communities. So what our program does is one of the sources of pollution is energy production. So by installing solar electric systems, which, just to give you a brief explanation of how solar works for those of us that don't know, it's a technology that harnesses the sunlight and translates it to electricity. So it's considered to be a renewable energy source. Right. The reason why it's a renewable energy source is because it's coming from a natural source of energy that can be constantly replenished. And the sun, last time I checked, the energy from the sun was free.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
so far.
So far. So we hope it stays that way. Yeah. And the solar panel technology takes the photons, the sunlight, and sometimes there's a confusion. Solar panels don't work, the solar electric systems don't work with heat, they work with sunlight. So there's a difference between solar thermal and solar photovoltaics. So what's on the home for electricity generation is solar photovoltaics. So it captures sunlight, photons, and it converts that to direct current, and that direct current is translated to usable electricity with a device called an inverter. So then that changes it to alternating current. Just to get a little bit technical with you.
I want to ask you a question about the technical.
Yeah, go for it.
So when we talk about a convert sunlight, so it needs to be sunny skies, or can it be cloudy and the rays come through?
Right. So great question. It converts both direct and indirect sunlight, or diffuse sunlight as it's called. So long as there's some type of light, the solar panels are able to harness that sunlight and convert it to electricity. They work better when there's more direct sunlight, obviously, but they'll still work relatively well when there's low to moderate sunlight out. And also the other aspect is solar by itself is considered an intermittent energy source.
Really?
Yeah, so it just basically means that the solar panels, if you were to just put solar panels on your house to try to run your house, imagine if a cloud comes over the sky or it starts to rain.
Right.
If your appliances are running on solar power, it's not necessarily going to work smoothly. So that's why it's called an intermittent energy source. In order for your appliances to work, you need a constant source of electricity, and sometimes solar doesn't always provide that.
So really then, cloudy skies or real sunny skies, or states like Southern California, not Southern California is not a state, but Southern California, states where it's super sunny, Arizona, parts of Texas, Florida, produces more electricity with the solar technology then?
Yes. So in theory it does. And the reason why I say in theory is because the places you mentioned have more sunlight or access to sunlight. It goes beyond that. It also depends on where the particular solar panel is facing, the position. So for example, in the state of California, the south or the west side of a roof is a good place to put solar, because it usually captures the most sunlight. Without getting too much in technical detail, just the position of the solar panels and the way we're positioned on the globe kind of makes those two directions the best place for sunlight. With that being said, you don't necessarily have to have California style sun in order to use solar effectively and efficiently. You can have sunlight in the amount of like the state of Washington and still be able to use solar effectively. It really just depends on the build of the solar panel system and the engineering that goes behind it. But ultimately, there is a way to combine the right pieces of technology to maximize your sunlight to produce electricity.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So when we talk about you guys are serving underserved communities, which I think is fantastic, what can you also share, like if someone owns a home and they're not necessarily in an underserved community? I know that the solar technology's come a long way. Prices have changed. There's options. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can lease, you can buy, and contribute back into the solar grid, so to speak, or the grid, or the matrix, if you will. I don't know what it's really called.
Yeah.
Break that down for us.
Sure. So basically, for a homeowner that's considering to get solar power, the general options is just broadly speaking, you can purchase a solar electric system. So if you have the capital up front to buy a solar electric system, or you have your own financing, that's usually one of the better options, because you're going to get a better rate, of return when you own the solar panel system yourself. Then for those that don't necessarily have the capital up front, you have two other business models. There's a leasing model, so you effectively rent the solar panels, if you will. So in a practical sense, you'll get a bill for renting the solar panel system, as well as whatever the solar panel system doesn't produce, you're going to get a bill from the utility company as well.
So if someone's leasing the solar panels, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's my understanding, if some of the panels are damaged or they just need general maintenance, the company they're leasing it from that owns it goes out and takes care of all that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the general terms are usually, because you're renting the solar panel systems, you're leasing the solar panel systems, it usually comes with some type of maintenance agreement as well. So as a consumer, you basically just purchase, it's like you're paying for a service, and then the solar panel systems will produce a certain amount of energy for you, and you're paying a little bit less for what the solar panel system is producing versus what the utility company is selling you from their side. So that's how essentially you save money on your electric bill.
Okay, fantastic.
And the other option is a power purchase agreement. So the way that works, broadly speaking, is there is a fixed cost for the hardware for a solar panel system. So it's sort of not necessarily renting the equipment, but what you're doing is you're purchasing the energy that the solar panel system produces. So that's why it's called a power purchase agreement. So you're purchasing power at a fixed rate over a fixed term.
So in all three scenarios, let's say your solar panels are producing more electricity than you're using. Because I seem to recall someone a couple years ago that bought the solar panels, and they were explaining that anything they don't use goes back into the system,
Right.
and they make money on that because it gets traded on the stock market or something like that. I mean, I don't know how true that is, but they're a very astute person that works in finance, so whatever they found, I'm pretty sure that's the way that went. But is that very common, or how does that all work? Because theoretically the whole point of solar is to have a better impact on our environment, right? A better footprint, more effective use of technology to provide electricity. Correct? Not create.
Yeah. So of course the conversation about environmental impact is one to have. It really just depends on the person that's purchasing the solar panel system. The motivation might be different. For some, it's financial. So these days, the cost for solar and your ROI is better than it was a couple years ago. So even if you look at it from a financial investment perspective, like, am I going to get my investment money back? Yes, you will. And it really just depends on the price you pay for the solar electric system and how much your electricity bill is. But there are calculations to be able to figure that out.
So I think it's pretty interesting. You know, selling homes, I've sold some homes that have solar on it, and you know, sometimes there's I don't want to say an issue, but we have to make sure when it comes to the new loan that the lease is transferable and all that kind of stuff. And I have a friend who bought a amazing 2-acre horse ranch, and she had a hard time finding someone to do solar. And the location, I mean, 2 acres, there's a lot of places you can put the solar, right? But it was very interesting, and so it ended up going over their barn, and for a home that's like 4,500 square feet plus a guest house, she's paying like $15 in the peak of summer for her electricity. I mean, like, how fabulous is that? Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to save money, again, the impact, and then, you know, there's just, I think it's still an arena where there's not enough information. It's not like a common conversation, right? Because not enough people have done it. But I think you were mentioning earlier that there's some information out there for the consumers to really get educated, right?
Right. So basically the California Public Utilities Commission, they're a governmental body that provides guidance for investor-owned utilities in the state of California. They've recently released what's called the California Solar Consumer Protection Guide. It's focused, or it's centered for consumers that are investor-owned utilities. However, the information that's provided in there, I think, is very useful in general. And it, you know, if you're not familiar with solar or don't necessarily know the right questions to ask, I feel like it's a really good document that gives you great perspective. And it also has a checklist that you can follow and kind of understand the right questions to ask solar integrators, you know, and do your diligence prior to making a decision. So that way you're not forced into making a decision that you're not necessarily fully informed about or comfortable with. This is what the document looks like, and I'm sure Corrie will put up the link of where to download it.
Absolutely. In fact, Nick's contact information will be below, because if you are in an underserved area, or you're questioning if you are or not, or wondering if Grid Alternative can help you, Nick's contact information is below, phone number, email, and we're definitely going to have a link to this consumer guide so that you can also download it and be able to get a little more educated and keep it as a resource. You might have questions somewhere down the road, or maybe you're thinking about solar, you're not quite there yet, and maybe in the next 6 months or year it's time to execute. So just keep that as a resource. Again, I really want to thank you, and for everybody watching today, thank you again. Please go ahead and put your comments below. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, please do so. Click the bell for updates and see you next time.